I think it's significant that this man who went through so many struggles to become sober, that seemed to be his main focus, still had self-esteem issues and still relied on others outside of himself, um, and was so, was depressed and struggled with this stuff for the rest of his life, even while he was, helping thousands and tens of thousands and then hundreds of thousands of people to get sober from alcohol. And I think, yeah, that realization that these addictions can come in all different forms, and it's to fill a gap that we have inside of ourselves that we don't know how to fill independently. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
But that's a great observation, John. I mean, it really is that no matter what's happening outside of ourselves and how successful, and look, his achievement was remarkable, right? How many millions of people have changed their lives substantially, right? Not a little bit, but substantially,
yeah,
because of his work with Dr. Bob. And yet he still had that hole in him, didn't he? He still had that emotional dependence and looking outside of himself for approval and for to be okay.
yeah.
And that's really the gift he gave us. I really see this emotional sobriety as his fourth legacy. After the steps, after the traditions, after general service office, emotional sobriety is really his fourth legacy. Well, thanks, John.
You got it.
Well, tonight we are continuing our discussion about holding on to yourself in relationships. And last week I started to role play um, some challenges that happen in communication and relationship. And this evening I'm going to take a little detour. We were going to come back and do that, and we may still do a little bit of that at the end of this. But I wanted to talk about what we have discovered in terms of relationship, in terms of communication in relationships. John Gottman, just a brilliant psychologist, he did this huge longitudinal study up at the University of Washington. I think he took about, maybe it's even over 1,500 couples that were engaged to be married and brought them into this research center where they videotaped all their interaction over the weekend. And they did that over a long period of time. These couples ended up getting married, and then a significant number of them, about 60%, divorced. And he had all these tapes of interaction between these couples as they lived in this apartment over the weekend. And he trained a bunch of research assistants to be able to code the interaction and then start to see if he could discover some kind of a pattern that determined those couples that stayed together and those couples that ended up getting divorced. And he came up with a formula that predicted divorce, I think, 90% of the time. And what he found was that four things were um, evident and present um, in these couples that got divorced. And he called them the four horsemen of the apocalypse. The first one was criticism. That when there was a high degree of criticism taking place between the couple, there was a serious problem. The criticism seemed to create a lot of defensiveness. So not only was there criticism in their interaction, but they became very, very defensive with each other. And as that went on over a period of time, more and more contempt was evident between the couple. They no longer liked each other. And it was quite obvious in terms of how they talked to each other that they had lost that sense of fondness for the person they were with. And that the fourth horseman of the apocalypse was emotional withdrawal, or stonewalling, as he called it, is that they would try to engage and one person would just give up, and it didn't seem, worthwhile to even try to talk about it anywhere because the conversations never went anywhere. They got stuck in this loop of criticism, defensiveness, contempt, and emotional withdrawal. So one of the things I thought would be a good idea is to talk about what we can do, because each and every one of us has gotten defensive in a relationship. And I want to take a little time to reflect on how do we deal with that? How can I take responsibility for what I'm experiencing and deal with it in a way that does not alienate me from my partner, but gives me a chance to stay connected during trouble? You've heard me say this over and over again, that if you really want to, do a crash course on creating more emotional maturity in your life, then or then really challenge yourself to stay connected when there's tension and trouble and add more of yourself to the relationship. Stay connected during trouble and add more of yourself. So I'm going to share my screen with you. We're going to go over a few things about how to handle defensiveness, and then maybe I'll bring Julia in and we'll try to role play a few of these things. I don't think Kim showed up tonight. I think I ran her away, Julia, but maybe not. I won't take it personally. Let me see if I find the right one. Oh, hold on one second. Let me make sure I've got the right PowerPoint. Yep, there it is. Okay. All right. All right. So we're going to talk about some tips on dealing with your defensiveness. Now, one of the most important things is if I'm interacting, let's say with Julia, and Julia says something to me like, Alan, you're just selfish all the time in our relationship. You're just thinking about yourself all the time. And then I find myself all of a sudden, right? I can feel a certain kind of energy taking over in my body. And I want to convince her that she's wrong because her criticism is evoking inside of me an anxiety. And I start to get worried that she doesn't care about me anymore. And my defensiveness, my first response is to try to convince her that she's wrong, which always backfires, by the way. Your defensiveness does not ever convince someone of what you're trying to convince them for. In fact, it probably goes the other way and they get more evidence. So we're going to try to find a way to neutralize that and to be able to use what you're experiencing to make a connection and not get alienated. Jason, are you taking notes on this? Huh? You paying attention? All right. Okay. Because I'm gonna give you a little quiz afterwards. All right. I'm just checking. I'm just checking. So the first thing is you got to name it. We say this all the time. You've got to become aware of what's going on. I know for me, I can feel it's like I can even show you what it feels like. It's like I want to go this way and I want to go towards that person, but with an aggressive energy. Like, how dare you almost think of me that way? Are you kidding me? Don't you know who I am? It's almost that kind of an energy comes up in me. I want to defend myself. I want to prove that you're wrong. Because underneath it, I'm feeling terribly anxious that you don't love me anymore. And so I can't get in touch with that. See, that vulnerability is not available to me when I first get anxious because I'm protecting myself. My first response is to protect myself and to retreat away from you. And that's usually what my defensiveness does, is that it separates me from you and says, you're wrong. How dare you think of me that way? How could you talk to me that way? And I try to convince you to think otherwise. Now, what can I do if I feel that? And I want to share this because it's such an important skill to have in a relationship. Instead of reacting to what you're feeling, describe it. I'll say that again. A very important skill is that if I start to feel defensive and Julia says, you're just selfish, and I can find myself wanting to now dismiss what she's saying and talk her out of it, instead of doing that, which would be a reaction, right? When I react, I'm going to either overreact or underreact because of my emotional dependency. Instead of doing that, I can describe and tell her what's going on. Look, Julia, I want to listen to you, but right now it's really hard for me. I'm feeling very defensive right now, and I'm not able to really, address this with you in a way that I think is going to be beneficial. So I just call myself out. Or I might even say, right now, I want to listen to you, but it's hard. I'm feeling defensive right now. My first reaction is to want to talk you out of what you're saying. And I know that's not going to be very helpful with us. So I name it. I name what I'm experiencing. I'm describing my reaction rather than reacting. At the same time that I'm aware of this, it's very important for me to breathe. I need to calm myself down because if I talk to you from a very agitated state, the best of me is not going to be communicating with the best in you. I'm going to go to my lowest common denominator. You know, Herb and I have talked about how the Neanderthal seems to come out at those moments, right? I am not my best self. So I want to try to calm myself down because I'm preparing to either fight or flight. So if I can slow down my breathing and catch myself for a moment, I'm likely to be able to regulate myself better. And I can do that even at the beginning. Before I name it, I need a minute here. When I get defensive, I want to interrupt you and I want to quibble with you about the truth. That's not what I said. What do you mean selfish? What are you talking about? I try to debate with you what's going on and try to tell you that's not the reality. But all that does is it turns our conversation into a struggle about who's right. It becomes a quibble, and that goes nowhere. So, really important, do not interrupt when you're in that state. Let your partner say whatever they need to say. Now, this is going to take you holding on to yourself a lot. Investigate. Show some curiosity at this point in time. Ask them for some specifics. Julia, you're telling me that I'm selfish. Can you share with me a specific example of that? When was the time that you saw me being most selfish, and what did that mean to you? So I show some curiosity about what she's experiencing, what's happening for her. And I try to listen to her experience rather than listening to her to make her wrong and to refute what she's saying. I'm listening to her to really try to understand what her experience is. And this is very important to stay connected because when I get defensive, empathy goes out the window. I'm no longer able to see you. All I'm seeing is a threat, and I want to somehow deal with or reduce that threat, which is why I try to convince you that you're wrong. Next, find something to agree with. Create a collaborative atmosphere rather than a combative atmosphere. God, you're right. I can see we're on the same page because you're not happy with me being selfish. And you know what? I don't like it when I'm selfish either. And I can see that does something to you that really damages our relationship. And I am sorry for that because I don't want to do that. And I know at times I am selfish. Let's see if we can understand that a little bit more. So I try to get on the same page with that person in that situation. God, I can see how in that experience, that what you just described, I was selfish. I can see how you experienced me that way. I didn't think of it like that before, but I can definitely see as we're talking about it now that I was being selfish. God, that's hard for me to admit. Can you love a guy that's selfish at times? I start to get anxious about that. You see how the dialogue continues on around that whole subject? But by finding something that I can agree with you on and get on the same page with you on, it keeps that connection to that other person. Remember what I said. Our goal here is to stay connected during trouble and add more self instead of getting alienated from each other when there's trouble. And it's so easy to get alienated. Some more tips. Ap- Apologize for my part in it or for your part in it. There's always something that we can own. Even if I say something like, I apologize for my part in all of this. What I'm trying to do is to maintain the connection. Now, that has to be authentic. You cannot be insincere when you do this. You can't be flippant in it. You've got to really be searching for what have I done? Am I culpable in this in some particular way? Most situations I can find that culpability in a situation because everything in a relationship is bilaterally determined. It doesn't mean I'm responsible for you, but I am responsible to you. And I want to take that responsibility. And my responsibility to you is to be able to own my stuff. What I've found, and I think I see this in the couples I work with, the more I take responsibility to own my stuff, the less pressure I will get from my partner. If I am deflecting, avoiding, abdicating responsibility, then my partner is going to be pointing out all kinds of ways I'm not working my program. Don't you think you need to go to more meetings, honey? Have you talked to your sponsor lately? Might be a good idea for you to go to a meeting tonight. The next tip is no buts. Uh-uh. Don't get into a tit for tat. Don't say, yeah, you're right. I'm responsible for that. But you know what you did was, no tit for tat stuff. You clean up your side of the thing because you need to clean up your side. And do not make it a condition that they have to do the same. You need to worry about how you're functioning in a relationship and you let them worry about how they're functioning. Don't counter criticize. And I see this maneuver taking on place. Yeah, I'm selfish, but what do you think you're doing when you keep go to the gym after work every day and you don't even call to see if I've got anything for dinner? I think that's friggin' selfish too. And you're on me about my selfishness? Why don't you take care of your shit, Julia? That's a counter criticism. That's what that would look like. And all that is to defend myself, right? And to deflect my taking responsibility because I'm anxious. So I'm going to try to make her wrong so she worries about how wrong she is rather than how angry she is about me being selfish. My God, that happens. That strategy I see so often about this counter criticism. If you have a legit issue, you bring it up at another time, not when you're being criticized, because it's just a deflection. And if you got something to say and say, I want to finish this and talking about it, and maybe tomorrow I want to bring up something, a grievance that I've got that I'd like to deal with. I don't want to do it now because I don't want to take away from what you're saying to me. So if you got something legit, yeah, that needs to be talked about too, but not at the same time. So counter criticism just throws gasoline on the fire. It's not important to be right, so keep silent especially when you know you're right. That's the most important time to keep your mouth shut. Let your partner know that they've been heard. Sometimes this is all that is needed to get back into sync with someone. God, it was tough for me at first to take it in and to hear what you're saying, but I really see how upset that made you. And I'm sorry for that. I really am. I'm going to see what I can do to clean that up some more. Or I'm going to see what I can do to clean that up in our relationship. I've been trying to, but that's obviously not enough. You got any tips on what I might do? Let's kind of collaborate. Let's talk about it. Boy, this one is so important. Sit with your response. We talk all the time about finding that space between a stimulus and your reaction. And Dr. Viktor Frankl says that in that space is where you find your power to choose, where you start to grow up, where you start to establish emotional sobriety, where you find some what we would call your real strength or your real power, is to be thoughtful and come up with the best possible response given the circumstance that you're dealing with. So sit with your response. Maybe even after the person brings this up and say, I need some time to really process this. Can we take a pause for a while and let me sit down? And then you got a lifeline. You call your sponsor and say, help, help, please. I want the best of me to do the talking for the rest of me, and I don't think I'm going to be able to do that feeling the way I am right now. You know, if if you work with me, put me on your speed dial. I mean, give me a quick call if I'm available. I'd give you a tip if I can in a couple seconds in terms of helping you get centered and be able to best respond to the situation. But what we want to move away from is reactivity. Because when you are responsive, then you are now integrating your thoughtfulness about the situation with your feelings about it. When we react, we are completely going off of our feelings. And as Dr. Nathaniel Branden reminds us all the time, feelings are not an infallible guide to the truth. Feelings are not an infallible, they're to be respected, but they're not to be given privilege. This is really important, is you thank your partner for initiating the conversation. Let them know that their turning to you is important to you because it means you're important to them. And so it was hard for me to hear. This is what I might say to Julia if she's criticizing me about my behavior in some way. Well, while it's hard for me to hear that and for me to look at some of these things because I want to please you all the time, 100% of the time. I think that's what I have to do for you to keep your love for me. But I want you to know it means a lot to me that you're turning to me to deal with this stuff and that you haven't given up on us. And I hope you never do. Show gratitude for being uncomfortable. So much of the time, our relationships are driven by, oh, we're good if we're in a good place and everything's going the way we want it to. But I'm here to tell you that that is not a measure of good in a relationship. It's easy to feel that way when things are going your way or when you're in sync with your partner. But the true metal of a relationship is what you do when you're out of sync and how you deal with it. And if you can deal with it in a way that does not alienate your partner from you, especially when you're being criticized, and especially when your first response is to try to make them wrong or to counter criticize them, and you stop that, you are making a significant deposit in that emotional bank account with your partner. When it goes south, and the way you respond diminishes the encounter that the person's just had with you, you've made a substantial withdrawal. And this is what Gottman found, is that when these withdrawals were taken over and over again, eventually the relationship went bankrupt. And when it went bankrupt, they ended up in divorce. So everything you do is either enhancing and making a contribution in a deposit to that emotional bank account, or you're making a withdrawal. There's no neutral. And if I appreciate, you coming to me, and as hard as it was, and for hard as it was to talk about, I am making a deposit in that emotional bank account, and I'm strengthening our relationship. This is an important one too. Is sometimes it's a good idea after you guys have talked about it and say, we've had a pretty heavy talk right now. And at first I got real defensive and I was able to back off and really hear what you had to say. I'd like some more time to reflect on it. How about if we come back in a couple days and revisit the topic again about my selfishness in our relationship, and let's see if I can understand it even more because I can tell it's important to you. Most people never do that because of the anxiety they feel about the conversation. They don't want to come back to it. And what I am saying here is that being uncomfortable and being willing to be uncomfortable and endure that discomfort is important to create a deeper connection. You see, people ask me all the time, is there any guarantee that our relationship is going to be okay? That somebody's not going to betray the other person and we're not going to, that we're not going to fall out of love with each other and start to really feel this contempt and dislike for that other person. What I tell them is that the process between you and your partner, the way you talk about things, is the closest thing you can come to a guarantee. Because if that process is a healthy one, it's going to keep the relationship alive and the love alive and very stimulated. There's some other things we can do about that as well, but in terms of communication, that becomes essential, is to pay attention to what is happening between us and how we manage these difficulties. So with that said, let me stop sharing my screen. I can do that. Yes, there we go. And let me invite Herb and Thom in and Julia and other Thom in, and you guys have a little discussion about this before we wrap up the evening.
Hello, my name is Herb, and I'm an alcoholic, and I'm glad to be here. Periodically, I miss. The note I made, both listening to you and then looking over some notes from the prior conversations on this particular chapter, is the importance of consciousness. At least for me, that's the solution, is for me to be conscious of the feeling, Alan, that you described in terms of that reaction. That's a default reaction. It's a go-to reaction. It's an automatic, at least I found it when it's a serious problem, that in fact the reaction has taken place before there's any consciousness. And to then embrace some humility about owning the consequences of that in terms of what has happened, and being careful. I'm a salesman. I have to be very careful about manipulation, because everything that you said in terms of those recommendations, that could be arrows in my quiver of a manipulation. And it doesn't have to be authentic or sincere at all. And so the other two little boxes I put around notes as you were talking, and I'm thinking about it, is what are my priorities and what are the universal principles to guide me?
What
This
what are my intentions here, right? What is my intention?
yes, yes, and so that's pretty. I mean, this there needs to be a book written about all of this. Yeah. So that's that. That's it for me. A consciousness being at least this is my theme right now, and for the entire year is to be as conscious as possible in the present moment, and not to go to robot. Um, anyway, thanks.
Not to go to robot. I love
I'd
it.
like a robot herb that I could put on my desk and have him like, well,
I have a bobblehead herb here.
I'll just jump in with the most growth I've experienced is standing still in those tough conversations when I wanted to run, where my brain was screaming, "You're in trouble here. This is going to be oh, painful is the right word. This is going to be tough. Stay here, listen to what she is saying, and be present." And it screams against, all of my training, all my upbringing, but it was the conscious thing to do. It was the thing that I knew that would bring me the biggest chance at growth, and it was appropriate too uh, for valuing the relationship, right? Like if this was worth it to me to stick through it, and sometimes I was in the wrong, and sometimes there was a degree of wrongness, but just sitting through the uncomfortability was so valuable.
Well, that's important, Tom. See, this a willingness to endure discomfort because of it's going to give a greater meaning and depth to our connection is very important, and it goes against our natural instinct is to run away from discomfort.
Yeah.
I mean, my God, I didn't turn into an addict because I enjoyed being uncomfortable. I mean, I couldn't stand it. Please give me a quick fix to this discomfort I'm feeling. Pick up a drink, smoke a joint, whatever it is that is, however, I'm trying to get freedom from that. I use that immediately and frequently. So that ability is it goes against our first response.
Yeah.
I've often loved what Thom Rutledge and I talk about oftentimes is listen to the second response, not the first one.
Mhm.
Give yourself a chance. The first one usually isn't going to be the best of you talking. It's going to be that reactive self. And all of us have a wiser self. I mean, you wouldn't be here tonight if you didn't have a wise self inside you. Listen for that part of you.
Right. And you have to listen for that part. Right? We've made that point that the intrapersonal characters are very much the same as our interpersonal relationships. The wisdom is never comes to us unsolicited. It doesn't come barging in the door and it doesn't grab us by the collar and start yelling wisdom at us. Always talk to people about their inner critic, their should monster. When's the last time you ever had to go to that part and say, "I'd love to get your thoughts"? I mean, you don't. It's like it's always gonna be there to tell you that stuff. And I tell you what this is. I wrote a lot of notes here as you were talking in terms of content, Alan. And this is a good day for me for this, I guess, because I've spent the day working with couples, had three different couples today, and I've been working with. So it's at various stages in work. And to me, when I'm working with couples, I'm working with communication. That's what that is. It's like, and I had a brand new couple in today to do that. And wow, I mean, just I have a lot of admiration for people who come into that process, and whether you do that through therapy or through yourself. But the thing is, I mean, talk about this is a place where you need I think the certain amount is, I think you need a shitload of humility. It's like because no matter how smart you are, no matter how psychologically, evolved you are in some ways, when you get into this communication stuff, like what Alan's talking about, most of us have to feel like we got to go back to first grade. I
Yeah.
mean, it's real basic stuff, and we have learned such bad habits I mean, give me three seconds and I can fuck up a whole relationship, a whole communication. It's like, and so, and for what you guys were talking, I was always thinking about the thing we say, anybody can have a good day on a good day. It's like what what I'm saying, what I'm thinking. I think one of the things one of the most important things. I'll say this, and there's so many other things we could add to this, but I'm just going to say this because I think it's important. It occurred to me a long time ago that this wonderful news that we get to choose our sources of self-esteem. And that's very good because I mean, I'm giving a stupid example, but one of the ways I learned it decades ago was I learned that when I was getting in trouble in my jobs all the time for not doing paperwork right, I learned that I did not need to be a source of my self-esteem, because other than keeping a job, I didn't give a fuck about the paperwork. It's like, so I got really comfortable with just being in trouble all the time about that, and just maintain. I mean, so they say, come into the office. I go, all right, here we go. It's like but what I realized, it was really a beautiful, enlightening moment or time for me that, and I was talking about, if we just look at this in terms of the work, what I did clinically with people, that mattered. That really mattered to me. And I wanted to be good at that. And I wanted to so that was a source of my self-esteem, my ability to interact with my colleagues and get along and collaborate, that kind of source of self-esteem. But there were so many things in my job that and nobody had ever helped me understand that perfectionism that we grow up in, that everything doesn't have to be a source of self-esteem. It's like, there's some things that I just suck at. And, it's like, I'm 70 years old. Apparently some of that's just not going to change. And I spent good money trying to change some things like that was just me. And I realized that. So I think so the point being here is that the source of self-esteem I want people who are working on this stuff to have is basically not getting it right, not being right, not winning an argument, but doing what every one of us is talking about, that hanging in there and being cool. Just staying cool and staying there. And even if it's a clusterfuck at the end of the whole thing, it's like, if you've maintained that sense of self, like that Alan talks about, if you're still there and you're breathing and you're neither attacking nor feeling attacked, it's like, take that as self-esteem. Even if you got to live to relearn the communication stuff the next day. But because if you can't hang into the discomfort that Alan's talking about, you can't do this communication. You have to be able to stay in it. And it's not like, it's not like, I always tell couples when they're getting married, if the preacher says, for better or worse, I always say, like, the preacher is lying to you at that point, because it's not or better or worse, because it's not like there's an option that there's not going to be worse. It's like, it's better and worse. And I want people to know, in this same thing, I want people to know that, no, this is going to be, there's no doubt about it. It's going to be really hard, and it's going to, and it's going to make you're not going to feel great about yourself. And, you're going to be challenged to actually look at yourself where you have not in the past, because that's what relationships do. I always say, God has a sense of humor, just not a very good one. And and you can tell that by the people we're getting relationships with. Somewhere he goes, oh, we're going to put Tom and Dee Dee together, and the people around him are going like, no, God damn it, don't do that. And he's going, no, watch this. This will be funny. It's like, and apparently he thinks it's funny, but but what we do find is that we find ourselves in relationships with people who are going to be wonderful teachers for us. They're, it's not, I don't think it's an accident that we push each other's buttons and that we're not attracted to people who don't. It's like, we're going to do that. So we got to do that hard work of learning this communication stuff. And the last thing I'll just say is because I've been working with this today with my clients. If I have some communication handouts that I give all the clients I'm working with, just some basic information. It's a pretty good. And if anybody would like a copy of those things, just email me and I'll be glad to send those to you. So because sometimes it just helps to have some tangible guides to follow. Amen.
Julia, what's your input?
One of the same things that stood out to Tom, Potash stood out to me, that, how difficult it is to be in the discomfort and how important that is for, physical sobriety, emotional sobriety, building that distress tolerance, and how rewarding it can be if we're able to do that. And the other thing is the power of vulnerability. When I don't get in a safe situation, in a safe relationship, when I don't get defensive and instead am able to share my experience, and connect with the person, how powerful that can be. An example of that is, and that's not exactly this topic, but there have been times my partner and I feel really disconnected. If we're super stressed, he's looking for a job right now. I get stressed with work. We both sort of shut down. There's less intimacy, there's less banter. And I found just to acknowledge that, and we'll watch more TV instead of talking, and just to say, hey, like, I feel kind of disconnected from you right now. I'm a little stressed. I know it's been like a hard couple days for you too. And we're just watching TV. Like, I think it's okay. I just want to like acknowledge that this is happening, and I don't like being disconnected from you. And that can open the door to I'm just naming it.
Yeah, Julia, I love that, because last year was very rough for us. Physical condition. My father-in-law died. Our dog was sick, and Pat, and it was just like being able to just go, I know it's tough, right? And we'll get back to each other. Just saying it out loud, just giving us an acknowledgement that we're blown out emotionally right now in other directions, and don't have the energy to put into the togetherness, but just by saying something like that, brings us back.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Before we stop tonight, Tom, I just want to make a few comments about a few of the things that are coming up in the chat.
Yeah, thank you.
One of the things that is really important in terms of understanding emotional sobriety is that what we're trying to transcend is a relationship being interdependent. So when you're asking things like, well, doesn't your partner have to want to participate in this? Well, it's great if they do. It's a nice request, but the answer is no. They don't. You see, it only takes one clear person to change the dance in a relationship. If I stop the dance, you can't continue. If Julia's quibbling with me and I stop quibbling, it doesn't work anymore. We're not going back and forth. I have to play my role in that for that dance to continue. And if I change my dance, the dance is going to change. Now, we know that to be 100% true. Everything in a relationship is bilaterally determined. Change is unilateral. So we'll say that again. Everything is bilaterally determined. I have a hand in your success and your failure. This idea that we're emotionally autonomous, we're striving for that, but we got a long way to go, baby. We'll reach that sometimes, but we're not going to be able to set up permanent residence in that in that zip code. I mean, it's just not going to happen. But what we can do is we can take responsibility for how I show up in that communication, regardless of what my partner's doing. So when I see all these comments, well, what if you got somebody who's a narcissist? And you know, my tip to you is quit worrying about who they are. Worry about who you are. Worrying about how you're showing up in that interaction. Worry about what you can do and trying to find some possibilities that are determined by you, not so dependent on who your partner is. See, that feeds right back into the emotional dependency. And one of the things we're going to be talking about in the seminar on Saturday, Thom, is the importance of, as we strive for this autonomy, all of the possibilities that opens up in making what we call creative adjustments to whatever challenge we're being faced with.